Wow, is it December already? This year sure went by fast. And with the year's end, of course, comes the obligatory retrospective Game of the Year selections of internet gaming personalities the world over, which I technically am one of these days. So indulge me for a second as I get in on the fun. But don't worry, I've got a great Game of the Year lined up for you all this year. A game unlike anything I had ever played before. A game with a novel concept and the execution to do it justice. A game that for the first time since 2017 and Breath of the Wild has, ironically enough, opened my eyes to a whole new world of potential as to what a video game can even be. A game called The Vale, Shadow of the Crown. And a game that if you have any broad appreciation for the medium of video games, you owe it to yourself to experience. So, what is The Vale? Well, I think one of the game's characters actually sums it up pretty concisely.
Escort a blind girl 500 miles down a treacherous valley in the wake of an invading horde.
Hey. Don't balk at the mere mention of the word escort. Yeah, I know, escort missions in video games don't exactly have the best reputation. But I promise, this one is different, y'all. For starters, you're not the guy escorting the blind girl. You are the blind girl.
You know I've never cared that you're blind. And our enemies will not care about that either when they set out to kill you.
A blind princess named Alex, whose goal after getting attacked and left for dead is to make her way back to her kingdom's capital. And that's actually why the footage you're seeing in this video mostly just consists of black screens with some floating particle effects. Since the character you're playing as is blind, you, the player, also can't see anything. So yes, it's more or less a video game without video. Instead of visuals informing your actions, it's mostly audio, which is a big reason why I recommend this game so highly. It offers an experience so like anything else I have played before, and would be worth playing for the novelty alone. The fact that it's quite good too is really just icing on the cake. But what exactly is Plague the Vale like?
Raise your shield. Excellent.
The Vale is divided into two main modes of gameplay: free exploration and combat. During exploration sections, you are given relatively free reign to move about a space, typically trying to use your hearing to navigate towards some sort of objective. These sections are framed in many different ways. Sometimes it's a relatively open field that you just need to get something from.
We'll spread out and move in on it slowly.
Sometimes it's a bustling town with numerous points of interest to check out.
We have you covered north to south.
Fresh bread, 2 loaves for a copper.
And sometimes the danger level is turned up, with you having to navigate through burning buildings or treacherous caves. Later on in the game, these exploration sections can sometimes include stealth mechanics, which I will say, very tense in this game, given the fact you can't actually see what you're trying to sneak around. You also end up getting a bow that you can use to shoot enemies. Yes, you heard me right. A bow, which you wield as a blind character. Don't believe me? Too bad, it's in the game. And let me tell you, there are few things more satisfying in life than landing a shot on a deer on your first try based only on the sound of its grazing.
You hit it. It's down. Well done.
Overall, these sections, while keeping the mechanics very similar between them, frame their respective vignettes uniquely enough and offer enough of a twist on the specifics to avoid getting stale by the end of the game. Then the other half of the gameplay is combat. Now, I was skeptical going into the Vale as to how exactly it would create an engaging combat system without utilizing visuals. And the answer was through limitations. If you're playing the Vale with a controller, then in combat your attacks are performed by moving the right analog stick, and your blocks by moving the left. Now you may be wondering, wait, if you block and attack with the analog sticks, then how do you move in combat? And the answer is, you don't. Once combat begins in the Vale, you don't have any movement controls, and instead must focus solely on your blocks and attacks, which work as follows. An enemy can be located in front of you, to your left, or to your right. In order to attack an enemy, you move your right analog stick in the direction you wish to attack. Now most enemies, if you just swing at them out of the blue, will block your attack. So what you usually have to do is wait for them to attack you, which you'll know is happening because you'll be able to hear their tell, and importantly, know where it's coming from based on which direction you hear the sound coming from. Then at that point, depending on the enemy, what attack they're doing, and the general playstyle you're going for, you'll either want to block with your shield by pushing the left analog stick in the direction you wish to block, and then counterattack, or just attack them first, hopefully interrupting their attack before they land a hit on you. And that's the basics to combat. As you progress through the game, different enemy types, and especially boss encounters, do a good job at mixing things up enough to keep things interesting.
A guardian.
Yes. You spot us coming, no doubt.
I need to block his side attacks and interrupt his overhead swing.
Then there's also a few other mechanics you can use like heavy attacks and special attacks, which play a role once they're introduced. And honestly, my impression of the combat is it's not just good for a video game without visuals, it's some of the most exhilarating combat I've experienced in years. It demands your full attention, otherwise you'll probably get lost in all the chaos surrounding you. In fact, I found myself usually closing my eyes during combat, specifically so I could focus more on what I was hearing and react better. And when you're in the zone, and the blocks and parries come like second nature, it feels like you're Daredevil or something, and it's great. And when you're barely hanging on for dear life, it's an incredibly tense experience, knowing that some unseen attack, if you fail to react to it on time, could be your doom. Then, when all the enemies are finally defeated and you hear Alex sheath her weapons, let me tell you, when you know you are practically on death's door, that sound effect often comes alongside a very heavy sigh of relief.
I think you killed it.
That's how the Vale operates, with exploration and combat sections trading off with each other. The exploration giving a slower, more methodical pace, and then the combat turning it up with its quick reaction-based life-and-death struggles. Both halves equally engaging, though in different ways, and when brought together in a single game, break up the game quite nicely, helping neither one to get stale from overexposure. Now the gameplay was what really got me hooked on the Vale, but that gameplay was only able to shine the way it did due to the great presentation the game possesses.
Do you know this village?
It's called Braga, but that's all I know. I've never been this far east.
Describe it for me.
Let's start with the obvious, the audio. Firstly, from a technical perspective, the positional audio works flawlessly, which is kind of important for this sort of game. That's not to say I never got confused as to which direction a sound was coming from, but in all such instances, that was just me getting a bit lost in the chaos of battle and making a mistake. From an artistic perspective, I think the audio design is great. All the sound effects I recall were believable and high quality, setting the scene perfectly. The Vale managed to nail, through primarily just audio, the feelings of peaceful, calm environments. Festive, bustling ones. The eerie.
This is where we last saw Hugo.
Honestly, Alex, it looks like a place where murderers dump their victims.
The tense.
Who's there? Uncle?
And even the chaotic. They also did a good job, in my opinion, of striking a good balance between having enough different sounds to allow you to be immersed in the space you're supposed to be in, while not having so many as to completely flood your ears with noise, distracting from the essential information-carrying sounds. These great soundscapes ended up forming quite a few set-piece moments throughout the game, which, in a lot of ways, managed to feel more impressive and immersive than what you might find in a big-budget AAA game. It's kind of like what they always say about how you shouldn't reveal a horror movie's monster till the end of the movie, because what your mind comes up with in the midst of your lack of knowledge is always going to be scarier than whatever abomination the special effects department can cook up.
Describe it.
I don't know if I can.
Well, with this game, I guarantee they wouldn't have had the budget to make grand, realistic cutscenes and set-piece moments visually. But with sound and a bit of rumble on the controller, this game was, just as an example, able to place me in one of the most convincingly visceral battles I've witnessed in a video game. So props to them for doing that with one sense completely out of the picture.
They're crossing the bridge! Shields up, men! Return fire! Milady, we have to... Swords ready!
Speaking of which, if you have the means to do so, I'd highly recommend playing this game with a controller, with rumble enabled. Because quite frankly, in all my years of playing video games, The Vale may be the very first one I've ever played where controller rumble significantly improved the experience. Like honestly, in most games I do not care for it in the slightest, and in The Vale it's not even like it's a particularly complicated use of rumble, mostly just the standard sort of rumble where you take a hit or some other sort of action happens and the control rumbles a bit. But in the absence of meaningful visuals, it does a lot to sell the experience and weight of the combat. Oh, and when you're low on health and the controller starts pulsing, man, even with this game's relatively small penalty for dying, those moments of near death and narrow victory were all the more intense, in large part due to that constant reminder that you're close to your demise from the pulsing controller. And let's not forget about the visuals, because while yes, The Vale is primarily an audio-based game, and can be very easily and comfortably played even if you are totally blind, that's not to say that there's not a bit of subtle, non-essential, really mostly scene-setting work that the visuals are doing. So the visuals in The Vale are just these particle effects that float around in a black void. I interpret them as a sort of visual representation of what Alex can infer from her senses outside of hearing, like knowing it's a sunny day out due to the heat of the sun beating down on her skin.
The sun just set. I felt its warmth leave.
Or that it's snowing because she can feel the flakes falling on her. Like I said, the first thing they do is help set the scene. The particles change color depending on where you are, what the weather's like, and what time of day it is. But then the other thing they do is help to provide a point of reference against your movement, so you can a bit better get a sense as to your speed when you are moving around. So those are nice, and let me stress this, little touches. By no means do you need to be looking at those particles to understand what's going on, quite to the contrary, as when things got serious in The Vale, I would usually close my eyes to more completely focus on listening. But even so, I think they are a clever way to make the screen not just some static image, while still not betraying the game's identity as an audio experience. And speaking of audio, one of the things you will listen to a lot in The Vale is its voice acting. And in my opinion, whether we were talking about the various screams, grunts, and battle cries in combat, or the conversations our main cast had with each other...
Why do you sound sad? It will be dark soon. You'll have your advantage back.
My advantage.
In the dark, you shine, Alex. Trust me.
I do. I trust you.
It was overall well done. In particular, I never felt the voice acting stuck out as having clearly not been recorded in the context in which it appeared in the game. That's to say, when a character is supposed to have, for example, just finished running for their life from something, the performances sound convincingly like that's what was happening. In general, the voice acting is well done. You really feel the emotions behind the lines, especially from Alex's actress.
I need to think, not talk.
Then stay by the fire. Rest.
And importantly, every character important to the plot has a distinct enough voice from the rest of the cast to where I had zero confusion as to who was speaking at any given time, which is important when the voice itself is really all you have to go off of. So well done in that department, The Vale. Now, The Vale markets itself as a story-rich game, so without going too deeply into spoilers, how is the story? Is it actually a tale worth experiencing? What I'll say is this. Aside from the whole protagonist being blind thing, The Vale's story starts off from a pretty standard place. Especially early on, it's really carried by our two main leads' chemistry with each other, which I found to be pretty good. The dynamic they have of Alex being a kind, somewhat naive princess, while Shepard is a bit more self-interested, cautious, and world-weary, isn't exactly the most original characterization in the world, but I enjoyed listening to them play off each other.
What do you think?
I think it's a distraction we can't afford. Perhaps we can find a guide to take us through the pass.
You don't believe the realm is in danger?
There is danger everywhere. I plan to stay out of it.
Then in the second half of the game, the plot went some places I honestly did not anticipate. It ultimately wrapped itself up in an unexpected yet satisfying way. Definitely one of the better video game stories I've experienced for whatever that's worth.
What was it? What did you see?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing I want to talk about. Let's go from this place.
And that is why you have to play The Vale, Shadow of the Crown. Quite frankly, if I haven't convinced you with what I've already said, I don't know what more I can say. I mean, I guess if you're still on the fence, you could check out my Let's Play of it over on my Let's Play channel to get a better idea as to how it plays moment to moment, but I really do recommend you try it out. It is a rare thing that a game comes out that is simultaneously such a breath of fresh air for most everything else on the market, and is of this high a quality. I'm just saying you need to experience it at least once. And hey, it's not a huge time commitment. I'm not asking you to dedicate yourself to a 100+ hour RPG. All I'm advising is that you set aside 5 to 7 hours to experience what is, in my opinion, the best game of 2021. Once you do, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it in the comments below. But anyways, guys, until next time, I've been CMeeCraft, and I will catch you in the next video. Goodbye. Like, I feel like I might be, like, right about to fall off a cliff here. Oh, no, no! Well, wasn't wrong.